President Trump is heading to the Middle East, but he's skipping Israel this time around. Why is the most pro-Israel president, maybe in U.S. history, not visiting the Holy Land? He will stop in Qatar. He will make another visit to Saudi Arabia and the UAE, but not Israel. I'm senior correspondent for All Israel News, Tal Heinrich, joining from New York, and with me is Joel Rosenberg, editor-in-chief. You are in Florida right now, right?
I am, yeah, speaking to a group of, at a conservative conference here, and just got in for a month-long speaking tour throughout the United States, long planned. But it is interesting that the moment I land, the president is just days away from heading into our neck of the woods in the Middle East.
But I know you have a question to, an answer rather, to the question that I just brought up, because you spoke to Trump's point man in Jerusalem, Ambassador Mike Huckabee. What did he
That's
tell
right.
you?
Well, so I'll tell you, Tal, and I appreciate the question. It's a huge question, actually. It's bigger than I think most people are putting weight on it. Why? Why is President Trump not going to Israel? Now, maybe there'll be a last minute change. Maybe they're holding back. Maybe, I don't know yet. But right now, it doesn't look like it. The president's been asked directly. Ambassador Huckabee, the new U.S. ambassador to Israel, has been asked. I asked him, is President Trump coming to Israel? And he said, no, there's no plans for this yet at this point. So I asked, I keep wanting to say Governor Huckabee, because that's the way I've known him for so many years, 15 years or whatever it's been. I asked Ambassador Huckabee on the Rosenberg Report last week, last Thursday night. And he said, look, well, President Trump has already spent a lot of time with Prime Minister Netanyahu. Prime Minister Netanyahu hadn't been invited at all to the White House, to the Oval Office during the Biden administration to meet with President Biden at all, even during wartime. And Huckabee rightly notes that, President Trump has already welcomed Bibi Netanyahu twice, not only to the White House, but to the Oval Office, to have very in-depth conversations on all the major issues that the two countries are facing. And he said, so this is now a chance to go and meet with our Arab allies. Okay, at one level, that's all true. I still don't buy it. Something is going on, unless it changes. And there's a surprise visit, which I think is still possible. Trump loves surprises. And but it feels to me, Tom, like there is actually a rift of some kind that Trump isn't getting from Netanyahu, something that he wants, because your question implies the answer. In other words, the most pro-Israel president in American history. I would say that's not even close. That he is the most pro-Israel president. Okay, other people might say, if you're a Democrat, you'd probably say President Bill Clinton was the most, pro-Israel, and others would say Biden. But the point being is, there's no reason to come to the Middle East and not stop in Israel. Now,
well, according to people at the White House, what we're seeing, various statesmen throughout last week, they say that the headlines that are supposed to come out of the Strip are mainly economic, which may not be directly related to Israel, but it does affect the relationship with Israel and the Arab world,
Yeah, well, I think that's true, that Trump wants a whole series of big wins, and those wins will be, we already had heard that the Saudi leadership, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, has committed to investing $600 billion with a B, $600 billion in the United States over the next, 4 or 5 years. President Trump wants that up to $1 trillion. Well, sure, that'd be great. And I don't know if he'll get a headline quite that big. That would be dramatic. And they'll have all kinds of trade and economic investment agreements. Yes, that will be the big news. However, and in talking to and interacting with senior leaders in the United Arab Emirates, there will also be big deals and important relationships economically, financially. I don't actually know why he's going to Qatar. That's a related question. We'll get to that in a moment. But I will say that I'm hearing a lot of angst, increasing anxiety from not only Israeli leaders, but evangelical Christian leaders here in the United States. As I'm traveling, I'm at a conference of about 460, mostly conservative leaders. There are evangelical leaders here also, but it's not a evangelical conference per se. It's a conservative conference. Because of the rules of the conference, I'm not allowed to say what's the exact name of it, but it's sort of very high level set of thinkers and influencers. Now, and I was invited to speak about where are we with the U.S.-Israel relationship, and where is President Trump going with as he goes to UAE, Saudi, and Qatar, and where's Trump heading with all these negotiations with Iran? But I can tell you overall, there's trust in President Trump because he is the most pro-Israel president, and he's an excellent president.
And the people around him, Joe. The people around him.
Mostly, yes, I would agree with that. However, there is a anxiety because Trump seems really determined to get a deal from Iran, and nobody here believes that Iran could be trusted for any deal. Now, I'm not saying that. Well, I don't know. I just don't know if Trump is just giving the Iranians an opportunity to reject true diplomacy so that he can have an international reason to bomb the living daylights out of the Iranian nuclear facilities. When I interviewed Ambassador Huckabee, and we now have this on All Israel News, we published that on Friday, what the point was that Huckabee said, look, he will do all-out war, but he prefers to give peace a chance. He's giving the Iranians every opportunity, excuse me, and but it might not work. Peace might not be possible. But there is growing anxiety, and this is among evangelical leaders who do trust Trump. So there's 2 points to keep it simple. One, evangelicals and other conservatives are growing anxious that Trump maybe could get played, could get rolled by the Iranian leadership, that his lead envoy, his special negotiator, Steve Witkoff, the Iranian portfolio is pretty steep. It's a pretty steep learning curve, and Witkoff is trying to make peace between the Russians and the Ukrainians. That should be a job to itself. Get all the hostages out of Gaza and figure out how to rebuild Gaza. That should be a job just to itself, in my view. And then third is how do you make a deal, if you even can, with the Iranian leadership to end the nuclear program and the nuclear threat once and for all, not just to kick the can down the road 5-10 years. That should be a job to itself. These are 3 different jobs, in my view. President Trump has got the same guy doing it, Steve Witkoff, who's very accomplished and is very successful in many ways. But I don't know if he's capable of doing all 3 at once, and he could make a mistake, and we can't afford a mistake. So that's one issue, is the Iran negotiations, and are we going to bomb Iran, or are we going to negotiate with Iran? What is going on? That's one set of anxieties. But the other is, and why exactly is the president not coming to Israel? You could still come and show solidarity. You could still come and affirm that the United States is going to take over Gaza once Hamas is destroyed, and we're going to rebuild it, and it's going to be beautiful. Yes, all presidents want something big to announce when you come to a country. But if you're already in the neighborhood and you specifically choose not to come, I think you're sending a signal. And my concern right now, Tal, and I can't back it up with proof yet, but my instinct is there's trouble in River City, that there are disagreements going on between Netanyahu and Trump on the Saudi relationship, for example. There's signals coming out of the White House.
The Houthi threat, by the way, the Iranian-backed Houthis in
there's
Yemen.
There's 2. The first is that Trump seems willing to go forward with Saudi civilian nuclear agreement without Israeli normalization with the Saudis. That's new and seems
That's a report. That's a report. You and I know better too,
True, but the fact that he's not, if Trump was coming, then you say, okay, they're reporting this, they're reporting that, but when he's not coming, all those individual reports look like potentially more, there's more there. And then this other issue is Trump basically makes a deal with the Houthis to say, okay, you're not going to bomb or attack U.S. shipping or our U.S. interests, right? Right. But Trump specifically doesn't say that the Houthis have promised not to attack Israel, and now they just did. They just fired another missile at Israel on Friday. So now this looks like daylight between the United States and Israel rather than two allies working together. So I don't know, Todd, do you have a take on what you think is happening?
Say this, it's so very difficult to read President Trump at this point, and not just on the Middle East. If it's, if it's the economy, if it's about certain appointments, choices that he made, his media statements. At the same time, he's not stopping Israel. He's not telling Israel, don't do this and don't do that. On one hand, he strikes a certain tune about a potential hostage release deal, and then a humanitarian aid assertion into Gaza. He says one thing about the Houthis, another thing about Iran, and it's so very difficult to read through all of this because some of these statements, or the way he puts them out, sometimes it's contradictory, or it's sending a different, it's striking a different tone with Israelis. But one thing that we learned is to judge what President Trump does by his actions, because also in media reports there are so many different interpretations to what he says, and I don't know. We should be hopeful. At the same time, we're still at a better point.
I think of the old when President Reagan was dealing with the Soviets, and he talked about an old Russian proverb: "Trust but verify." Look, I have a great deal of trust in President Trump, but he is making me anxious. I'm not going to take the responsibility that I'm just somehow abandoning Trump and I don't trust him. No, there's lots of reasons to trust him, but he and his team are creating reasons to say, what is going on here? This doesn't make sense.
I totally understand you, but I keep reminding myself Mike Huckabee is there, Marco Rubio is there, Pete Hegseth is right there, and it's the same president who killed Qasem Soleimani, the most courageous action.
No, Tal, you're absolutely right, except that Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth was supposed to be in Israel on Friday and canceled his trip. Now, what I'm telling you is, if you look at the lineup of the names and the reputations, there's trust. When you look at the data points of specific things that are going on right now, it doesn't make sense. Steve Witkoff gets to sign the Iranian nuclear portfolio, negotiations portfolio, and the first substantive thing he says is we're going to allow Iran to enrich to 3.67% uranium purity. Now, then he immediately gets pushed back.
They backtracked, right?
And then Witkoff backs up and backtracks. However, this is not a good signal. What I want is strength and clarity and consistency from President Trump and every single one of his top people. Right now, we're getting mixed signals. We're getting, I'm coming to Israel, then I'm not coming to Israel, meaning Pete Hegseth. I'm coming
if
to
Israel's getting mixed signals, Joel, imagine
Israel.
what kind of signals Israel's enemy are getting.
Well, no, I disagree with that. I think right now, when you see potential division and disagreements between Israel and the United States publicly, and you see a president coming to the region and not coming to Israel, when you see a defense secretary say, I'm coming to the region, I'm coming to Israel, oh, then I'm not coming. No, that sends very encouraging signals to Iran. Right at the moment, we don't want to give them any encouragement whatsoever.
At least you said potential division. It's not. We've been through divisions before.
Well, let me summarize this. I know we got to go. Something weird is happening. Something unsettling is happening. Will it all become clear in a couple of days? Yeah, I hope so. And you and I will be happy to see that. But right now, there are signals that people who love the president and trust the president and love the United States and love Israel, he and his team are making me and many others, Israelis as well as evangelicals, anxious by their actions. I don't understand it, but I tend to think where there's smoke, there's some sort of fire. I'm not saying it's a 10-alarm blaze. I'm just saying something's not right. And you and I need to keep doing reporting to figure out what's going on.
Well, we'll have to wait and see and judge Trump by his actions. We can hope for the best. Joel Rosenberg in Florida. I'm Tal Heinrich in New York, and that was a video newscast by All Israel News. We will follow Trump's visit to the region and keep you all updated.